You have to show people something where they're like, this is something I've never seen before. It looks badass. It's sensational, where you almost don't have the words when you see it. And the video kind of brings you along and explains what's up. And once you get into that immediate like shock and all, like, these guys are doing what? And then you get into, hey, we're actually doing this for a reason. There's like a really significant reason why we're doing this. And one of the big things is that this is a race against time. Our lakes aren't freezing like they used to. Some we might never be able to sample.
This is Life's Tough. Explorers are tougher. And I'm your host, Richard Wiese. Scratch the surface of an explorer and you'll find an adventure and a great story. This show is about their tales. This podcast is a proud supporter of the Explorers Club and the EC50 initiative, 50 people changing the world that the world needs to know about. For more information, go to explorers.org. Welcome to Life is Tough. Explorers are tougher in association with the Explorers Club. I'm your host, Richard Wiese. Today's guest is Andrew Budziak, a filmmaker and explorer who goes to places most of us wouldn't even consider, underneath frozen lakes. Ouch. Through his project, Freeze the Future, he leads extreme diving expeditions to study the hidden life beneath the ice. Tiny organisms and fragile food chains that quietly support entire freshwater systems. And I know while cold plunges are popular among health fanatics these days, I've done it myself, Andrew has taken the idea just a bit further. Andrew, good to see you.
Thanks, Richard.
You were just in New York receiving, I guess, an award or the honoree of becoming Explorers Club 50 people who are changing the world that the world needs to know about. What did you think about your fellow explorers?
When we all met, so everybody came together, and we had all chatted on Instagram or WhatsApp before. And when we came to the initial little cocktail reception, which was pretty small, and just, I believe, the 24 of us that made it to New York, there were instantly like best friends made and like lifelong friendships. And it was one of those moments where you just get to the absolute privilege of being with people who know exactly what you're talking about. You're not the weirdest person in the room. You're amongst people that do and live these wild existence. And it was such a lovely group. And I kept saying over and over, it wasn't just me, other people were saying this, it felt like summer camp. And I was sad to leave and sad to depart. But since then, I've just been, been messaging and chatting and sharing photos. And from, like, let's just say, like, a professional sense aside, it was just such an honor and privilege to spend time with these people. And then the professional element, like, it's incredible, the connections and the information, and, hey, have you looked into this grant? Hey, have you heard about this program? It was nonstop. And we just had, I don't want to speak for the entire class, but I think I'm pretty safe in saying we just had an absolutely magical time. And the program itself is phenomenal. For the recognition, and what you've built here with the EC50 is amazing. But just very selfishly, I had an absolute blast in New York.
Well, that's great. Now, it was interesting because you're probably coming to the Explorers Club for the first time, or at least a lot of people were.
A lot of people were. Yeah, I actually became a member last year and came down for the ECAD weekend, but didn't do the dinner, did some other stuff. And it was cool, like meeting people and moving around. But this year was just a completely different caliber because we're here for an additional reason other than just checking out all the cool stuff. We're here to be part of this class. But I do believe most of the EC50, this is their first time experiencing all this craziness.
And did you see any difference between the, say, EC50, which are primarily younger
Yep.
scientists in conservation, with what would people typically describe as an explorer?
I think there's a pretty serious and visible generational divide. I don't actually know where it is, the age line, maybe upper 40s or something like that, where if you're younger than whatever age, it's conservation, conservation, conservation. And that's not to say that exploring is not part of that, or discovering or uncovering new things or firsts or whatever. But the idea that we're going to do something just for the sake of being first, that's not really a thing. Maybe it is, but the primary goal, I think, for a lot of pretty much everybody in that class in that EC50, by and large, was conservation. And even if it is, discovering wrecks or something like that, it's like, hey, that's great. Let's get this marine area protected. And I'm a member of the Royal Canadian Geographical Society and the International League of Conservation Photographers as well. And I see that there, where young people come in and we've known our whole lives that the planet is in a lot of trouble. And to go into faraway places and to spend money and to burn jet fuel to get to these locations, I think it's a pretty high bar for people that want to go do that for the purpose of doing it. So are you going to travel around the world to do something that doesn't help, or are you going to travel around the world to do something awesome and to try to make a difference and try to protect these areas? And not to say that other generation above us isn't so interested in conservation, but I think it's just like, I would say 99% of us my age and younger, that's the goal. It's let's protect these magnificent places.
I've had the honor and pleasure of meeting a lot of those famous first people. I met all of the Apollo astronauts. I've met people first to the Mariana Trench. And you're right, conservation never seemed to be part of their message. Without using sort of a bad metaphor to what you do, in some respects, you can go deeper by not going further.
We've been pretty much everywhere there is to visit on this planet. And now the job is to protect these places. We need to figure out how they work, what's putting pressures on these places, and what we can do to make sure they stay the way they are and don't degrade any further. And it's really interesting. Like, I love that, like you're talking about that generation's the first, and obviously being into diving, I'm a big Cousteau fan, and it's amazing to see his career, what his message was at the end. And I think he died a really angry man, seeing what had happened to these places that he loved and visited in his early life when they were pristine. And his message at the end was conservation, saying, like, in the language wasn't necessarily there, but it was like, look what we've done. Look at the horrors here. And obviously messages from Sylvia Earle, Jane Goodall, even a lot of the astronauts, either that have been to the moon or ISS, they come back and they will talk about these things, whether, the immediate press conference, those press conferences in the 60s and 70s, that wasn't always front of mind. It was like, hey, what was it like on the moon? But then later there were, a number of astronauts that have spoken out about this. And I have some friends in the Canadian Space Program as well, and they are diehard, like, let's protect it. But that I think maybe comes a bit secondary for some people, but that message is certainly there.
Our mission is to empower the next generation of explorers. If you like this podcast, please recommend it to a friend and have them join the expedition. So tell us a little about your work. When you think of things you can do in exploration or study, I don't think for most people diving through frozen lakes and looking at extremophiles, extreme organisms that live in there, comes first to mind. Most people would probably think that a lake is quite lifeless in the winter or under ice.
The way that it was explained to me when I got into this project, that limnology, so the study of lakes, that's why so little of that has happened in the winter, that it's too expensive, too dangerous, just flat out impossible. Going under lake ice is really hard. And the thinking was that there wasn't, like, why are we going? There's nothing to study. There's nothing there. Lakes are sleepy. We drill holes, ice fishing. These fish are just kind of like lazing around. There's not much productivity happening. But what researchers have been realizing is that no, that's not the case. And there was an icebreaker going through the Great Lakes a number of years ago, 10 years ago now. There was a researcher on board looking down at this ice that was these big blocks that were being churned over. And he's looking down, he goes, well, that's weird. What's that? And it looked like a shag carpet on the underside of one of these ice blocks. And it was algae. And that was a surprise to a lot of people because like that degree of productivity of algae that you could see it way up, what's an icebreaker, like 2 stories. You're looking down and seeing this stuff. It's like, holy moly, this is really important. There's something there. And the second you try to cut a block out of the ice and flip it over, that algae is just going to fall off. Dr. Andrew Bromberger at Environment and Climate Change Canada I'd had a conversation with him, and he was telling me this icebreaker story. And he's like, yeah, we're trying to get this algae. We're trying to figure out how to get this algae and study it. And I said, well, what if I get a team of ice divers together and we go down there and get it ourselves? And he kind of giggled and he's like, yeah, that would be wild. So that was around 2022. And we just put our heads together and figured out, how are we going to do this? How are we going to get the funding? How are we going to figure out the technology? Who's going to go on this? What's this going to look like? And, here we are years later, dozens of dives and hundreds of samples and a little bit of hypothermia, but we've figured out how to do this.
Andrew, you brought up an interesting point. It's like, how am I going to get funding, or how am I going to be able to do this? Part of getting funding is really explaining to people why this, why now, why important. And I know you're a filmmaker, which means at your heart, you're a storyteller and someone who likes to communicate. It's obvious when we speak. How do you explain to people this is important and they should care? Because you have polar bears up in Canada. That's kind of a sexy animal. Algae on the bottom of ice.
This was such a learning moment for me. When I was trying to get funding to do this, nobody would touch it. People are like, what are you talking about? Like, what you want to do? What? Like, yeah, I want to like cut a hole, go into the ice, get some algae. And people are like, that's like, no. So an amazing organization out of Ontario called the Consicon Foundation had funded some of my work in the past, and they were like, yeah, you know what? Here's some money. Like, go see if you can do it. I spent every like cent of that fund almost immediately. We went out, we did it, and I brought a film crew with me. And we shot a little trailer of what this looked like. So I had my camera under the water, we had drones above, we had all this great footage. Some of it ended up in the intro video to ECAT. So I put together this reel, and around that time I'd been talking to Nat Geo, and speaking of polar bears, so they hadn't seen anything yet, and they said, okay, we love this idea. Just replace algae with polar bears and you got yourself a deal. And I'm like, well, okay, that's kind of not the point. But anyway, we got this sizzle together, and it was this 3-minute video of the story. Here's what we're trying to do, and then showing us doing it. Once that video was released, it was like the floodgates opened in terms of interest and people wanting to know what we were doing, and even previous people that had turned me down being like, oh, okay, this is awesome. Like, yeah, it's awesome. And there's a drone shot in this video where we were diving under ice that was very thin, and it was like crystal. You could like see through it. And the only way that you knew that we were actually under there is when our bubbles hit the surface and they kind of exploded on this ice sheet. And it's really remarkable footage. And to be able to show this to people, what we were doing, like to condense what we're doing into this 3-minute little video was everything. And that really got the ball rolling on this super exciting project that it's caught fire. People are interested in what we're doing and want to get behind it.
I'm curious because at least in the United States, there's a real absence of nature programming. Not so much in the England. The BBC has a lot of that.
Yep.
And so, what is it about how you told your story that would apply to other people? I mean, as I said, you've taken a subject that doesn't have the appeal of polar bears or even other large animals. What is it about how you told your story you think appealed to people?
The very basic, most immediate level, it doesn't matter what story you're telling, you need to shock and awe and have all the cool points. You have to show people something where they're like, this is something I've never seen before. It looks badass, it's sensational, where you almost don't have the words when you see it. And the video kind of brings you along and explains what's up. And once you get into that immediate shock and all, these guys are doing what? And then you get into, hey, we're actually doing this for a reason. There's a really significant reason why we're doing this. And one of the big things is that this is a race against time. Our lakes aren't freezing like they used to. Some we might never be able to sample because of the conditions. We're losing our winters. So this is a race against time. So that's dramatic. When you just say, "Oh, we're getting algae," people are like, "Oh, okay, like that thing in your pool." But then when you say like, "No, this is important, and we're losing our window to do it," and when we do it, it looks really unique and interesting. That combo forms this really great Trojan horse where the ice diving, the adventure, the danger, the thrill brings you into this world. And it's like, oh, I come out the other side of this thing caring and understanding about algae. And that's huge. Like to me, that's the ultimate goal for being in the realm of conservation and storytelling, is to get people hooked without them even knowing. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a researcher. I'm not going to be publishing papers that are like changing the world, but I think I have the skill set to turn people on to something like algae. It's just the old school storytelling techniques from Shakespeare on. Hey, let's get people in the first act, draw them in, and hopefully they sit around long enough to care about this thing when they're out the other side.
Okay, for the non-scientist who may be watching or listening to this, what is it that you've discovered about algae under ice, and why should they care?
Everything we do here is new, and that's been so awesome. No one's gotten these samples. Nobody knew what was on the underside of the ice. So we're not looking in the water column. Like what we are looking at is the algae entrained on the ice bottom. So when you're standing on a frozen lake, think about, you can be standing on 6 inches to 3-4 feet of ice. On the bottom of that ice, algae is growing, and there is algae on there. So our first question was, could we get it? Yes, we could get it intact, not just like we have. It has to be a very like refined, precise method to make sure that you're just getting that stuff that's trapped up there, that's growing on there. So yes, we could get it. Okay, what is there? Is it the same as the rest of the water column? Is it stuff we see in the summer? And what we found is that there is a particular kind of algae that's on there, and that algae, it's like exclusively that's what's there. It's in the rest of the water column, but like kind of minimally. Algae islandica is the name of the algae that's on there. That's what dominates. It's a really fatty kind of algae that helps kick off the food web in a lot of ways throughout the winter. It's just a great fatty algae, and you can find it in the food chain right throughout the year. So what we're asking now, there are kind of two questions we're asking now is, well, just how important is this stuff that's up there to the rest of the water column? And if we lose it, if lakes are losing ice and losing this algae that's growing on there, what does that mean for the health of the water, for drinking water, for fish, for the animals that rely on that lake, for the rivers it feeds, for us as humans living alongside this water? If we lose that ice, if we lose that algae, what does that mean in the broader picture? And that's what we're trying to answer now. And we're doing that by getting as many samples as we possibly can every winter.
Now, I have to imagine being out on, Canadian ice. What are some of the obstacles or hidden dangers or obvious dangers that you guys have?
Depending on where we go, we could be pretty remote. So Lake of the Woods is on the Ontario-Manitoba border. It's absolutely amazing. Kenora is the nearest town. We've gone there a couple of times because this lake reliably freezes. It's far enough north where you don't have to take a plane. Like, we're not blowing our budget on planes that can land on the ice. Like, we're able to get out to these ice roads. So imagine, like, I'm from Toronto. Lake of the Woods is 22 hours away. I throw everything into a van. Some people kind of fly. I drive. Expedition leader, you got to do that. We drive up with all our scuba gear, tanks, compressors, medical stuff, gear, all of that. Film crew, everything they need. We get out there, we get to our accommodations, then we load things in another truck and we drive out on an ice road. And an ice road, for people that don't know, it's exactly that. It's a road that doesn't exist in the summer. It's just there in the winter. And the ice has to be a certain thickness, and there are rules of driving on the ice. People do this to get to ice fishing spots. Some people have islands that you can only drive to in the winter, so you bring your building supplies there. But we drove on this particular dive to a really remote bay, and it was minus 26 Celsius, which is like minus 15 Fahrenheit, I think.
It starts merging at that point.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's cold.
it's
It's
cold.
cold. And everything is working against you. Scuba gear is not meant, it's not designed to operate in those temperatures. It's just not. So we do a lot of alterations to our gear, some customization to make sure that it will operate successfully. The whole trick of ice diving, this is true of any winter activity, is don't get wet, don't get cold. So when we get dressed out there, like we go out in our parkas, whatever, we got to cut a giant hole. These holes are like 10 by 10. The blocks that we pulled out on this particular
And you're in
expedition.
a dry suit.
No, I'm right. Yeah, right now I'm in a parka. We're just prepping everything we
Oh.
need to do, and we're pulling these blocks out so we can get a hole we can dive through, and they're about 300 pounds each. So that's a crazy amount of work. You have the wind, you have all this stuff working against you. We're using chainsaws, we're using pickaxes, like we're using all this stuff. So we get a hole, and then it's time to get dressed. So we had a snowmobile trailer with us, which is just like wood. So you're stripping down to your underwear essentially in like in a little wood trailer and quickly trying to get everything on. So yes, we get into our dry suits and we have electric heating under there. So I have an electric vest and electric gloves. They don't keep you warm, they keep you from getting more cold. That's how I'd say. So we're all bundled up. We got our gear on, neoprene hoods, so your head's getting wet, your face is getting wet, but the rest of you is
So with
should
your
be dry.
limbs, I mean,
Yeah.
I did my first, when I got certified for diving when I was 16, I did it the Long Island Sound in February. And it was freezing. I mean,
Yep.
it was, there was ice on the water.
Yeah.
And I remember I kept spitting my regulator, my mouthpiece, because I couldn't feel my lips, so I couldn't grip. So how do you even protect that?
You lose the seal. You don't even know when it falls out. It's like being, when you go to the dentist. We condition ourselves. So we do a lot of winter diving. The second it gets cold out, we are in the water. And there are also ways to warm up your face. Like when you go in, you can kind of put your face in, blow some bubbles, shock your face a little bit, and get in. And we just keep biting down with your teeth. Use your teeth, use your lips, and you could actually see bubbles creeping out. You're like, where are those bubbles coming from? Oh yeah, my mouth, because it's like freezing. So that's a huge part. But the thing is, we've done this enough, and it's like if you know you're going to be uncomfortable, that's okay, right? And that's if you're conditioned, if you know
you can
"Hey, I've been there,
It's
I've
like
done
taking
this,
a cold plunge. You know it's going to
Exactly.
be cold, and so
you know what's coming.
and I think in part of that too, I once cross country skied to the North Pole, and you learn a lot about staying warm.
Yes.
You have to eat a lot, have to
Yep.
obviously vent moisture, and if you're well rested too. If you're tired, you get cold easy.
Absolutely. And hydration is huge. And movement, the way you move your fingers, move your toes, those little things make all the difference. Because when one finger starts to get cold, man, it's miserable, especially when
Yeah.
you're working with your hands. You know that from skiing too. You're using your hands and your feet all the time. And you got to make sure those things, because when you start getting cold, those are the parts of your body that begin to shut down to preserve warmth for your main organs.
What's the craziest reaction you've gotten from a trucker or an ice fisherman seeing you guys go into the water? You must have gotten a lot of comical comments.
We did a dive in Lake Simcoe, which was actually from shore, and there's a city, Barrie, like is right there. Like this was kind of an urban dive, but it's still a lake. The conditions under there are the same. And while we were doing this, there was a family that had just come from India, from the Punjab, and they're standing there, and we have this great photo of four guys in a turban, and this is their first winter watching us do this, and they're kind of standing, and one of my buddies went to go talk to them, and they're like, what are you doing? They're like, does everybody do this? So he's like, no, these guys are like particularly nuts. But that was incredible. This family, it was their first winter, and they see us like doing this. So, people will come, but in a lot of these northern places, northern lakes, people do ice dive. It's a thing that people occasionally do. You're not going to generally meet an ice diver in Phoenix. But when you talk to, Canadian divers, a number of us, a lot of people at least have maybe once, but it's a thing that's maybe a little more known. But you still have people, you're absolutely, blowing their minds. And especially when you're, somewhere else, I'm at a party and somebody asks what I do and I tell them, there's just this blank look. Like if you're like, oh, I'm a mountain climber, people are like, oh yeah, I've heard of mountain climbers. I've seen movies, I've seen whatever. Like, oh, I'm an ice diver. Well, what does that mean? I scuba dive under the ice. and there's just like it's just blank. They're just, you could see them like there's no, for a lot of people, there's no point of reference for this. It's
Well, I mean, I
so
suppose people,
strange.
have you ever done a cold plunge just to sit in cold water?
Yeah, I hate it. It's miserable. Like I don't know why people do that. I'll never, like, unless there's a maybe gun to my head, but I work so hard to not have that feeling. Like I work so hard not to be wet and cold. Like my suit, everything I wear, I spent like thousands of dollars to be warm and comfortable under the ice. And then I see people like just jumping in this ice bath or doing a polar plunge. I'm like, you're nuts. I spent
Well,
so
you
much time
could be
under the
nuts.
ice.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And I hate to tell people because I know I'm going to get a lot of hate. There really haven't been a lot of scientific studies that have proven that
No.
those cold plunges are good for you. There's been stuff on saunas up the wazoo.
That's right. But let me tie cold plunges together with what I do. I think it is an absolute privilege when people have the opportunity to find out what their limits are and to find out
Absolutely.
what they're made of.
Sure.
That could be skiing to the North Pole. That could be climbing K2. That could be, you had a baby 2 years ago and you want to run a 5K. Pushing yourself and trying to find those limits is a real privilege. And I think 90% of people that go out and do it, any of these things on any scale, what they realize is their limits are so much further than they ever thought. And they're capable of so much more than they ever thought. So yeah, cold plunge might have like zero health benefits, but to live, to engage in elective suffering and to put yourself through something, discomfort, pain, whatever, something that's not your desk job, that's never a waste of time. I think that's great. It teaches you about yourself and maybe shows you that you can do a little more in your life than you ever thought. And hey, maybe we're not made of glass after all.
There was a great British book or study about 100 years ago. It's a book, I think it's called Going to the Extremes or Going to the Extreme. And it's literally these guys who would go into boxes with high temperatures to see, how hot they could survive or how cold or how windy. I mean, there's been these studies. And sort of to your point of the earlier part of the conversation, there is a part of, at least me, and I'm sure you have the same thing, that you want to go out in a storm or there's something really feeling alive when you feel like Mother Nature's throwing a lot at you and you're able to somehow survive it. I know it's not a logical thing to say, but I know like when I was a kid, snowstorms, I wanted to go out in it. Or if there was a hurricane offshore, my father and I would go swimming in the ocean in big waves. And there's just that element of feeling that you want to experience nature or weather.
It's so rare that we really feel alive. I think if you compare the average house in North America and you took somebody that lived 150 years ago and put them in that house, they'd be like, "Oh, you're the richest man on that's ever lived." Like we've gone from living in a general state of comfort to living in just luxury all the time. And that, I don't know, there's just something,
Well, Andrew, that's
whatever.
removed us more from nature, and
I agree.
And
I fully agree.
so we don't have a lot of time left, but this whole idea of communicating science, that you have a whole new generation of kids that would rather be inside than outside because they find it more interesting to be on computer games than to go out fishing or out in the woods or out hiking and all those things. How do we communicate this message?
I think that's exposure and kids. I've got a 9-year-old, I've got a 2-year-old, and these boys love being outside because they've been outside. They also love their screens, which is fine too. But it's exposure. It is absolute exposure. And if you could get kids out before the age of, I don't know, 12, 13, and just be like, hey, this is awesome. And it's really, really, really easy to love. That's the whole thing. And it's really hard as we get older and we get set in our ways. It's hard to make people want to go out and do these things. But, I don't know why there aren't more outdoor classrooms for kids. Some schools are catching on to that. But like, okay, you have like your half hour lunch recess or 15 minutes or whatever, like spend the bloody day outside. Like just get outside. That's good for health. It's good for your brain. It's good for everything. And it just comes back to it. Like I could shout, I could try to tell stories, I could do whatever, but nothing is going to compete with just exposure and getting out there.
And before we leave, if somebody wants to find out more about your project, how should they look for it?
They could go to freezethefuture.ca, or they could go to my Instagram, which is Andrew_Budziak.
And Freeze the Future is not a fertility clinic where people are freezing eggs or sperm or anything. It's
no, that's good to know, because if this ever goes south, I could sell that URL to some up and coming sperm egg or something. But for now, it's algae. That's what we're freezing.
Great, Andrew. Thank you so much for being on our show.
This was great. I really appreciate it, Richard.
I hope you enjoyed our podcast. Now we have a little favor to ask. We'd really appreciate your support. So make sure to leave us a 5-star review and hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss another episode. See you out on the trail.